One of the stories we've been covering extensively of late, extortion against South Asian business owners in this country. And we know the incidence of reported cases of that kind of crime have been rising across the country steadily since October of last year, notably. CBC News has now learned that in Ontario, Alberta and British Columbia, police are investigating at least 74 incidents, and business owners are telling CBC News that number is likely low compared to what is really going on. It's Jamie Strachan who's been investigating, and he's here with me this morning to tell us a little bit more about what you've learned. Good morning.
Morning, Heather. I think what really struck us about this when we started kind of diving into it is that, you know, we knew these cases were happening. They were kind of trickling through in the news, but the actual scope of the number was surprising to us, you know, that 74 number that you mentioned. And also, this wasn't something that was on the radar of police really until October. If you had a graph of it, it kind of was flat and then, you know, spiked upwards. And they really hadn't seen, you know, anything really like this in the past, with, you know, as often as they were seeing it. And the one thread that kind of went through it all was the violence. You know, here in Ontario, you had businesses, you know, shot up. You had homes shot out. Out in Edmonton, you had, you know, more than a dozen arsons. You had drive-by shootings. There was real violence here, and people in the community were scared. We had the opportunity to speak with one victim. He operates a business in Peel, just west of Toronto. His business, you know, received a phone call. They didn't know, you know, whether to take it seriously or not. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, a day later, overnight, you know, 3 guys with guns come to the business, and, you know, there's 40 bullet casings on the ground the next morning. Here's a clip of him telling us kind of what happened and really how it changed how he had to live his life and how he kind of had to deal with keeping him and his family safe.
When we go out, we need to look around, make sure there's nobody parked. We are minimizing our exposure in the society. I only answer if I have the number saved. I don't answer unknown calls anymore.
That's interesting. I only answer if I have the number saved. Otherwise, no.
Yeah, it was funny, when we were with him, I said, your phone's buzzing all the time. And, you know, every time I looked down, it was unknown number. And he was like, yeah, unless I know who it is, I'm not answering the phone.
You mentioned that it was kind of a flat line before. Police didn't seem to be responding. We certainly weren't talking about this until last October, and then this spike in incidents. How are police handling this now? Well,
you know, they're playing catch up, but they are learning more and more about kind of where these calls are coming from, and more importantly, who's making them. In the South Asian community, there's lots of conjecture about links back to India and organized crime there. The RCMP has formed a task force here in Canada to try to link these cases in Alberta and Ontario and beyond together. And they've begun to make some links. They do know it's 1 or 2 organized crime groups, you know, that are behind this. But in terms of that India connection, they're exploring it, but they're not ready to say definitively that it is coming from India. The inspector, Adam McIntosh, the head of that task force, explains more about how they're approaching this investigation.
We are certainly open to a multitude of possibilities around the motive as to why, including connections internationally. However, people can use apps such as WhatsApp, and it can be difficult to identify where they're coming from, or lengthy in our ability to obtain that information. And so these types of investigations can take a long time.
Heather, I just want to mention a couple of things, you know, quickly before I go in this. You know, with all of these, you know, crimes, we always kind of hear it's the tip of the iceberg. Right. But I think with this, you know, it really is. I mean, people in this community talk to each other, they follow the news, they see the violence out there. A lot of people are choosing to pay and say, you know what, I don't want to get the police involved. A lot of people aren't reporting it to the police. You know, they are working, you know, both task force in Peel, the RCMP, police in Alberta, you know, to try to get to the bottom of this, but there's a lot of things they're working against. The inspector mentioned, you know, WhatsApp. These encoded phone calls makes it very difficult. And just when they think they have, you know, some firm leads around this organized crime group, as one officer said to me, you know, you have these copycats. All you need here is a phone and a gun and a willingness to use it. And I think that's what's made this investigation, very difficult.